Hey everybody, it's Rabbit. Welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at 15 small changes to War Thunder. Now, the vast majority of these would be relatively small. They would just be quality of life improvements. They wouldn't come up every game, or even most games, but that also means they would be relatively easy for Gaijin to fix, and the vast majority likely wouldn't require a major title update. Of course, there's the obvious caveat that the game is kind of spaghetti code at this point, so what would and would not require a lot of work to implement is really anybody's guess, but most of them don't seem that involved. Also, there may or may not be 15 changes on this list. I didn't actually make a list, like I had it sorted out and it was 15, then I added some and removed some, so who knows if it's 15. I certainly don't. Have fun. And to kick things off, how about letting players replenish fire protection equipment on capture points? Now, a long time ago, the only thing you could really replenish on capture points was ammo, and then crew if you had the replenishment upgrade and you had lost crew. However, they've added more and more things to the sequence, and honestly I think the only reason why fire protection has gotten skipped over in this process is that it just doesn't come up that much. But when it does come up, it's kind of frustrating, especially when you're in a scenario where you're next to a capture point and you've lost both of your FPE, and there's literally nothing you can do. You just have to hope a teammate's nearby if you get caught on fire again. It just seems excessively tedious and kind of incongruous that we can wake somebody up from the barracks, we can grab some more ammo from the armory, we can even order a new drone off Amazon, but nobody in that process can grab a fire extinguisher, so it would be a nice little quality of life change to have this altered. And as a nice segue, how about we let people put out fires on capture points even if they don't have fire protection equipment? The game currently lets you do this with repairing, so I'm not sure why it doesn't let you do this with FPE. And this doesn't come up that much because often when you're set on fire, your engine is also knocked out. So in those scenarios, you can't actually get to a capture point unless you were already on it and capturing it. So it's not that common of a thing to come up, but it is kind of frustrating when your vehicle's operational or you have a stock vehicle capturing a point and a plane knocks out your engine multiple times, and now you just die even though you're trying to help your team and do what you're supposed to be doing. And stepping off from that, reduce the amount of damage you take from blowout panels working successfully. Now, the blowout panel mechanic, if you're not that familiar because it's only really at higher tiers, prominently it's on the Abrams but is on several other vehicles. When your blowout panels work successfully, what they do is it starts a fire that you can't put out in any way unless you dunk the back of the turret in water, and the fire could potentially kill your entire crew, which completely defeats the point of blowout panels, because the entire point of blowout panels is to sacrifice your ammo to save your crew. So that just seems kind of dumb, but even if your crew survives the blowout panels going off, usually they're so badly injured that your tank suffers significant deficiencies in terms of your mobility, your ability to turn your turret, all that good stuff. So I just think the damage should be significantly reduced because you already have multiple other penalties when blowout panels trigger successfully, including losing all of your ammo. And that's a neat segue into our next suggestion. Give us a way to heal crew members that are injured. I don't really care what they implement for this, whether it be a one-time use med pack or you automatically heal crew members on capture points the same way you'd replenish ammo, but it's just very tedious from a gameplay standpoint to have one of your crew members, specifically your driver or your gunner, get knocked down to orange or even red without dying, and now your vehicle just handles like complete crap and there's nothing you can do about it. You're just essentially screwed for the remainder of the battle. So at least some way to do it, even if it was a one-time use item or even if it was getting to a capture point, which isn't always possible, would still be appreciated. And the next small change, going off of crew, is to make Israeli crews by default at least level 15. Now, the problem is that when you go into the Israeli tech tree, you're going in at rank 4 for both aviation and ground forces. And this is a bit of an issue because by the time you get to rank 4, or 6.0 in the case of the M51 Super Sherman, most enemies have already gotten to the level of 15, 20, 30 crew skills, and you're still sitting here at a 1, you have basically nothing. So it would reduce some of the tedium, especially as a lot of the Israeli vehicles don't have the best stock performance to begin with, and it becomes even more tedious with low crew skills. And for our next change, I would like to see a 2-second delay added for the commander's override. Now, for anybody that hasn't gotten high enough BR to see this, this is a feature where the commander can take control of the gun. The problem is right now it's instantaneous. So this is a little weird from both a realism standpoint, because this means that your commander was essentially psychic and knew the exact millisecond your gunner would die, but also from a gameplay standpoint it's very jarring to go straight from killing the gunner incapacitates the tank completely to killing the gunner does literally nothing. And especially in the 7.0 to 9.0 range, you can be fighting enemies where both of those things can happen, and you really just have to hard memorize what tanks do and don't have the override. So adding a 2-second delay wouldn't completely remove the benefit of a commander's override, but it would still give you some benefit for knocking out the enemy gunner and potentially give you time to like get to cover or do something else. And that's a neat segue into the next fix: add assistant driver controls. So a lot of tanks, especially in the World War II era that are in the game, especially some of the more popular ones, did have assistant drivers. This was somebody who sat next to the driver, or even somebody who was rearward facing as a reverse driver that had the full driver's controls and could control the vehicle. So it's kind of odd to me that we have the commander gunner controls, but we don't have the assistant driver controls. Now might be a really involved change. Like, I'm not actually sure how the crew members are specifically coded and how easy it would do to go through and add this, but it seems a little odd that this is on so many of the vehicles that are pretty popular in the game, at least in the real world, but aren't actually represented in the game in any meaningful way. And of course, if it was added, I would like to see the same kind of delay that you have for the commander's gunner's controls, like the 2-second delay I recommended, just to keep it from being, you literally don't care if your driver kills. Like, it would still be a disadvantage, it just wouldn't be as big of one. And since we're on the subject of crews, no crew lock on a disconnect. The game knows when you've disconnected from the server rather than just leaving a match. So getting disconnected and then jumping in and seeing your entire lineup is red is just really obnoxious. And it doesn't really make any sense. At least for casual matchups, nobody's going to be doing like forced DCs and like going in and out of the game and all that crap to try and like get some minor advantage. Like, maybe if they had like a competitive mode, the forced DCs might actually be like an issue, but at this point it doesn't make any sense to crew lock on DC at all. Next up, the game should add an artillery mechanic for the artillery pieces in the game. However, a lot of people really go overboard when suggesting this mechanic because they look at World of Tanks and they don't realize that World of Tanks has both A, significantly smaller map sizes, and B, automatically calculates elevation, so you can't really indirect fire shells in that game. In War Thunder, if you want to fire into the enemy spawn, when you spawn, you can do it. You just raise your barrel into the air and fire. Like, it's not actually something that the game stops you from doing in any way. All you need is information. So give information. So whenever an enemy is scouted, if you're in a vehicle classified as an artillery piece, instead of getting the normal kind of bouncing around arrow in their general location, you would get a crosshair, and that crosshair would have a general range estimate. So if you wanted to, you could fire artillery shells. And of course, because most vehicles that are artillery in the game are SPGs, and SPGs don't have the artillery strike option, you could use the artillery strike calling time accuracy feature to improve the accuracy, to improve how small the crosshair is, or how accurate the range measurement is. It would just fit pretty organically with the game. And you could use it or not use it, it just doesn't really matter. On maps like Advance of the Rhine, obviously you're not going to be using it that much, but unlike World of Tanks, you're not forced to play artillery on tiny maps. So overall, I think this would be a net benefit to the game, although I'm not sure how much people would really use it. And next up is something near and dear to my heart, that is adding a drop-down menu in the spawn screen for equipping or unequipping certain additional armor packages on ground vehicles. Now, we already have drop-downs when you spawn into a plane where you can select different types of ammo, fuel, you can change its model, you can change how it performs. It doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to just add a drop-down to disable or enable certain armor packages. These would be seeing things like the track armor that you see on some World War II tanks, all the way up to like the slat armor or like the SEP package, or the Tusk package, sorry, on the M1A2 SEP. Like, it doesn't seem like there's any reason why Gaijin couldn't just add a drop-down where you select different armor packages, obviously because the drawback to the armor package is weight, whereas the advantage is armor. So if you're on a big map like Red Desert, where you don't really need the armor, you would much rather have the added mobility of not having that weight, you could just not select it. However, if you're on something like Advance of the Rhine, an absolutely tiny map, you don't really need the mobility, so you might as well get the extra protection, even if it's not that substantial. Next up is actually a pretty big source of tedium for me whenever it does come up, and that is players that are in air vehicles should not count as active players in a ground battle match. In other words, if all of the players on one team are in planes, you will start a ticket bleed process as if your entire team had been wiped out. Because at the end of the day, it is a ground battle, somebody should have to be on the ground. I'm okay with them doing some kind of warning flashing on the screen, much like the return to battlefield message saying, ticket bleed will begin in X seconds, no ground vehicles detected, whatever. But at the end of the day, it is a ground battle. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect somebody to be on the ground for your team to win the game. However, one exception would be nuke bombers. I do think nuke bombers should always prevent ticket bleed in that fashion, because if somebody's earned a nuke, they should get a chance to drop it. However, speaking of nukes, there should be a more pronounced audio and visual warning that a nuke is on the way. This is a problem I've run into in both when I was in an air vehicle and when I was in a ground vehicle. When you're in an air vehicle, the air raid siren only plays when you're on the ground or near the ground battlefield. So if you're too high altitude or you're a little too far away, you don't hear it at all, and you're entirely reliant on your team letting you know there's a nuke inbound to try and intercept it. Additionally, on the ground, if you're in a pitched battle, there's artillery going off everywhere, people are shooting everywhere, there are aircraft strafing you, it's very easy to not hear that air raid siren. So something more pronounced like a voiceover message saying, enemy nuke being prepared, intercepted, or friendly nuke is being prepared, protected, or whatever like that, would be appreciated, just to make sure that everybody on the map knows a nuke is incoming, because the fact that they put the air raid siren in there to begin with means it's not supposed to be a secret that the nuke is on the way. And next up is something I think most ground players can get behind, and that is removing zombie planes from the game. What I mean by a zombie plane is, if you are in a tank and the enemy gets kill credit for you, you're just kicked back to the spawn screen. Exact same thing happens in a boat. If you're in a plane and the enemy gets kill credit for you, unless they knocked out your pilot, you have 15 seconds or until you hit the ground to do as much damage as possible. And this doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no reason why aircraft specifically should just have this game mode where they just get to do as much damage as possible before they die. Just have them kick back to the spawn screen when kill credit is awarded like every other vehicle in the game. It's just a weird inconsistency, and it makes trying to play anti-air even more tedious than it already is. Now, this next one may just be me, but I would very much like for in ground RB models to see markers for where friendly helipads and planes are, just a visual without having to go to the map. It just feels kind of tedious to add that one extra step of having to flash through your map and then constantly look back and forth, or just have to remember where all the helipads and airfields are, especially because their positions do change depending on what battle rating you're at, as obviously at higher tiers you add helipads and the airfields move further away. So for me, that would just make it a little less tedious, but that might just be a personal thing. Next up, I would honestly like it if they would remove the wing overload crash from the game. Now, what I'm not saying is that the wing overload itself shouldn't exist. If you pull too many Gs, you should break off part of your wing. However, the game calling that a quote-unquote crash and kicking you out of your vehicle, that's complete BS. The game is perfectly happy if you're on fire hurtling towards the ground with no control surfaces to be like, let's see if you can pull out of this one. On the other hand, if you just snap part of your wing off, it's like, nope, can't possibly recover that. I mean, they're perfectly fine, calling this BS in front of you a landing, but snapping off part of your wing somehow kills you. It's just very inconsistent, and that's one of my core issues with the way wing overload currently works, is what the game considers to be flyable and not flyable just seems like a coin flip. For our next issue, can we not pay any repair costs when we get team killed? 9 times out of 10, you can't control whether or not you get team killed. It's just an idiot lands a bomb wrong, or some noob at top tier decides to shoot a missile for no reason. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. It doesn't make any sense that we're paying a repair bill for it. So here we're going to look at what is almost certainly going to be a more involved change, and that is adding autoloaders to tanks. And at least a few people were saying to themselves, don't autoloaders already exist in War Thunder? There are no autoloaders in War Thunder. No autoloader is currently represented on a vehicle that uses the autoloader mechanic. And this is pretty significant because this means that a pretty large functional part of the vehicle, the part that reloads the gun, essentially doesn't exist and can't be damaged, unlike every other tank that doesn't have an autoloader. And it just seems really weird and really inconsistent that this part is not modeled, and I always find it odd that nobody ever brings this up. Obviously, this would require essentially a major title update to do, but it just seems very unusual for the sake of authenticity that this hasn't already been put in the game, that there's no discussion about putting it in the game. And for our last change, this is going to be another more involved one. Whenever a player unlocks a rank 6 vehicle for the first time, before they can take it out, they must complete a series of challenges. And I see challenges in quotes. They aren't actually challenges, they're just a series of checks to make sure the person understands how the mechanics at rank 6 and above work for like ground vehicles or aircraft or whatever. These are checks like how to use thermal imaging, how to use laser rangefinders, what to use sabos for, what to use heat FS rounds for, how do radars work, how do Fox 1s and Fox 2 missiles work, things like that. Just things to make sure the player has the correct keys mapped to play a top tier game and knows what these different functions of a vehicle are used for. And of course, the reason why you call them challenges instead of requirements is so that the player has some sense of accomplishment for going through them, and of course you reward them afterwards. And while there's a lot of things you could reward them with, one thing that a lot of players who just jump straight into top tier don't have and probably aren't thinking about but probably need are crew skills. So you could give crew training out for free for completing these challenges. So not only do you have, your brand new F4S that you actually know how to use, but you have, say, a level 15, level 20 crew, so you at least have some basic proficiency to actually fly that aircraft. I really think this could help to improve a lot of the premium problems with the game. It wouldn't solve all of them, but at least having people know what their vehicles can do could help a lot. And that's our video for today, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had a great time. If you have any other small changes, just drop them down in the comments, or let me know if you think I'm off base on some of these. That's also fine. Anyway, hope you have a nice day, everybody.